All right, everybody. Welcome to my lecture. Today's topic is the Virginia opossum, also known as its scientific name, the Didelphis virginiana. And I just wanted to point out a few things. First, I do have a very needy kitten who I cannot control, so she may meow or make appearances. And number two, I'm finally understanding the awkwardness of giving a lecture to virtually no one. So shout out to all the professors and TAs who have been doing this all semester. It's actually really hard. All right. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about why I chose the Virginia opossum. So first of all, I personally cared for them this past January when I volunteered at Aspen Valley Wildlife Sanctuary. And I fell in love with them. They're such awkward little guys, personally, I find them really cute. They're really awkward and funny. And I also think that they are incredibly misunderstood, as a lot of people see them as pests, kind of similar to how some people view raccoons. But I'm here today to educate you about why they are so unique and pretty cool. So let's get started. So first, I just have the Virginia opossum's taxonomic hierarchy. So its kingdom is Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Didelmorphia, family Didelphidae, genus Didelphis, and finally its species, which is the Didelphis virginiana. All right, next I'm going to talk a little bit about its physical description. So the adult Virginia opossum is about the size of a house cat, about this big. Adult opossums have white faces, long pointed snouts, as you can see in this video here. This is an opossum that I did care for personally, so this is my video. They have small rounded ears that they can have marks at the top, as you can see in this top corner here. This opossum has pink on the top of his ears, with the rest of his ears being black. They have small beady eyes, and they have a thick, coarse gray undercoat. So they're not really soft. They have a really coarse texture, and then their outer coat is white and it is more sparse. And we'll get a little bit about to why it is like that later on. Next up, I'm going to talk about their tails. So the Virginia opossum has a prehensile, thick, rat-like tail. And so prehensile just means that they can use it kind of as a third limb. It's really helpful for them to grasp onto things, to hold on to items, and they can also use it as a mechanism when climbing. And so here I have a video of myself, and I'm using Mr., who is one of the opossums at Aspen, to kind of show off his prehensile tail. So as you can see, he's gripping onto my hands and he had his tail in my pocket. And he's using this because I'm holding him up a little bit above the ground, so he feels like he needs to grab onto something. So, yeah. Next up, I just want to give a little myth buster, if you will. So a lot of people believe that the Virginia opossum can hang from branches with their tail. However, their body weight is too large for their tails to support. But the reason people do think this is because juvenile Virginia opossums do actually have this ability. Quite cute. Up next, I just want to talk on the life expectancy and the common causes of death for the Virginia opossum. So unfortunately, the average life expectancy for a wild Virginia opossum is 2 to 2.7 years. They do have a relatively short life expectancy, and researchers haven't really determined as to why this is. It's just kind of unknown. Their common causes of death is hit by car. That's mostly for adult opossums because they do tend to move around a lot. And for the young opossums or the juvenile opossums, predators are a big cause of death for them, as they're similar to like small rodents and rats. So birds of prey often prey upon young opossums. However, their survival strategies, they are really large generalists. So as I will speak about later, when it comes to habitat, food consumption, diet, stuff like that, the Virginia opossum really is general about it. They don't put that much thought into what they're going to eat or where they're going to live. They also tend to have really large litters. So I'll speak about this later, but the Virginia opossum tends to put out litters up to around 13 young. And they also reproduce often. So the Virginia opossum is able to reproduce year round. However, they tend to have an average of 2 litters a year. Next, I'm going to speak about the Virginia opossum's activity. So the Virginia opossum is nocturnal. They come out to scavenge and eat at night, and that's when they do most of their exercise. So they can walk, they can swim, and they also climb trees. And research shows that they are most active between 1700 hours and 700 hours, which is 5 p.m. and 7 a.m. Up next, I am going to compare male and female physical description and physiology a little bit. So first I'm going to start with the similarities between the two. So fur color is the same for Jacks and Jills. So males are called Jacks and females are called Jills. Both genders possess a cloaca. So this is a common exit for all urinary, reproductive, and digestive system exits. Another big difference between the male and female is their body weight. So males do have a larger body weight than females. However, the average adult opossum weighs roughly 3.74 kgs. Also, only females have a pouch to carry their young. So as I mentioned, the opossum is a marsupial. So the young are carried in a pouch. And in place of a pouch, males have a scrotum. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about male versus female reproduction. So when it comes to the male, after copulation, Jacks leave and they do not come back to the Jill or to the Joeys once they're born. And this is just because Virginia opossums leave a very solo lifestyle. They do not live in packs or in groups. They only get together for reproduction. The male also has a very unique forked penis that sits inside the cloaca. As for the females, the Jills will carry the Joeys in her pouch for about 2 months, and she will remain with them for an additional month after they can leave the pouch. The female also has a polyovular, polyestrous reproductive system, and she has 2 vaginal canals. Something I found really interesting, this is a little bit of my first fun fact. So the Greek prefix di in front of the Didelphis virginiana for their scientific name, it means the word two, obviously, and the word delphis, meaning womb, is alluded to the unique double tract of the female opossum. So this really, their scientific name really comes back to this really interesting double vaginal canal that they have here. Up next, I'm going to talk about the gestation period for the Virginiana opossum. So Virginiana opossums have a gestation period of about 11 to 13 days. After this, at birth, the opossums weigh on average 0.16 grams, and they're about the size of a dime, so they are really very small. After parturition, the babies, which are called joeys, will move to the pouch to continue their development. Because at birth they are hairless, they cannot see, and as I mentioned, they are very small. They will spend roughly 2 months in the pouch where they will be constantly attached to the nipple of the mom. And to continue on that, A litter of joeys can range from 4 to 25 young. However, the female only has 13 nipples in the pouch, and they're in the shape of a horseshoe so that the joeys can kind of align themselves accordingly. Um, However, because of this, a lot of baby opossums do die before having the chance to develop in the pouch. So only those that get to latch to a nipple in the pouch survive. And after 2 months of living in the pouch, the joeys will start to exit, and they will take turns kind of piggybacking, as you can see in these photos, on the Jill. And she kind of teaches them a little bit of how to be an opossum. And she does this for about an additional month after they exit the pouch. So in total, joeys will stay with the Jill for 3 months until they move on, basically. As like I said before, the Virginia opossum is a solo animal, so they will not come back to their mother, and the mother will not go looking for her young. Um, Up next, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Virginiana opossum's defensive behaviors. Um, as I mentioned, they are solo animals, and they only come together for reproduction. So if they encounter another opossum or someone that they consider a predator or another animal that they just don't want to be around, they have a lot of bluffing and intimidation displays. They are typically not a very dangerous animal, so they don't really they're more of a talker than a fighter. So they will hiss, growl, lunge, and if they truly feel threatened, deathing or like faking death, playing dead, is their biggest defense mechanism, if you will. So usually when they are faking death, they keep their mouth open and they assume a ventral position, like in this bottom photo here. And I find this really funny. And it reminds me of the opossums from Ice Age. Whenever they were scared of the dinosaurs, they would always play dead. Next up, I'm going to discuss the Virginia opossum's geographical range. So this is another fun fact. The Virginia opossum is the only marsupial that calls North America home. And so its geographical range goes all the way from northern Mexico all the way up to southern Canada. And the climate change, so the increase in the world's climate, has expanded their geographical range. Before, they really only made it to mid or northern USA, but because of the climate increase, they are able to go up into southern Canada right here. All right, now I'm going to discuss body temperature and thermal regulation. So ambient body temperature of the Virginia opossum is somewhere between 35 and 35.5 degrees Celsius. And to maintain this body temperature, the opossum uses a few methods of thermal regulation. So first, under heat stress, the opossum will spread saliva on their fur to help with heat evaporation. Additionally, those sparse outer coats that I was talking about earlier also is a really good mechanism for facilitating evaporative heat loss. And another really important thing for evaporative heat loss is their naked ears, feet, and tails. So because there's no fur, it's really easy for them to evaporate heat on those areas. Oppositely, under cold stress, the opossum can use vasoconstriction, piloerection, and shivering to maintain their body temperature and to try to keep warm. And although, as I mentioned, the Virginia opossum does come up more in the northern range now, because they do have those naked ears, they have no fur on their feet, and a naked tail. Those extremities can suffer from frostbite in the opossums that live in the northern parts of the range. All right, now I'm just going to speak a little bit on habitat selection and what is important to the Virginia opossum when it comes to selecting their habitat. So because the Virginia opossum has such a wide geographical range, when it comes to habitat selection, the Virginia opossum is not very picky, and they can adapt to all different areas rather easily because of its large diet choice, as I will discuss a little bit further. So the two main concerns for the Virginia opossum when it comes to habitat selection is a good water source and abundant food. And so here I have a few videos of the opossums that I cared for, and they were pretty happy with their habitat selection at Aspen, because here I can show you that they have a very abundant food. As this little guy's gonna munch on a smelt. And here I have someone drinking water. All right, so other than abundant food and water, the Virginia opossum can basically live anywhere, whether that be in the forests, in prairies, urban settings, or wetlands. And as I further discuss their diet, I'll explain how the opossums are really big generalists. So as long as they can find something to scavenge, they will live anywhere. So it's common enough to see these guys in the forest, like I mentioned, and also in urban settings, very similar to raccoons, how they'll scavenge through garbages, and whether that be like in a city at restaurants or in a more like neighborhood type for like local people's garbage. All right, so now to speak upon their diet. So in the wild, the Virginia opossum is a scavenger and a very big generalist. Their diet consists mainly of insects, carrion, fruits, and grains, depending on the season. So they will eat pretty much everything. Opossums are described as opportunistic diet generalists, and their food preferences make this species an omnivore with a preference for animal matter. Studies have also indicated that opossums play really important roles in ecosystems as seed dispersers and predators of small animals and insects. Also, one of my favorite fun facts is that opossums are largely viewed as a pest species. However, their large diet variety often eliminates many unwanted insects in people's gardens, such as slugs, beetles, crickets, snails, and they even eat ticks. And also, because opossums are solo travelers, they don't have the ability to completely deplete a farmer's crop if they decide to stop by for a snack. So, for example, animals that travel together, such as deer, often travel in one or two. If they are on a farmer's property and they stop to eat some of the crop, they can often deplete a large chunk of this crop. However, because the opossum travels alone and doesn't eat that much, they honestly don't affect the crop that much. All right. So now to discuss toxins, anti-nutrients, or limiting nutrients of the Virginia opossum. So the Virginia opossum is described in literature as having a relatively unrestricted diet. So because the Virginia opossum is a huge diet generalist, this is one of their key factors for survival, because they can pretty much eat anything and get everything they need from any food items. The Virginia opossum have also adapted themselves to have a high tolerance to the poisonous compounds found in plants, as well as in many species that have eaten those plants. So this is particularly important for the Virginia opossums that live in the lower or southern range of their geographical range, because there are more small poisonous reptiles, small poisonous plants. So this is really important for them to get their full nutrition. And because they are adapted to the consummation of the poison, it won't affect them in any negative way. So And as I was saying, they also are adapted to not be affected by the poison if a carrion they were eating were to have toxins in its blood. So for example, if the Virginia opossum was snacking on some carrion and that dead animal had eaten some poison from another animal or another plant, and that may have been its cause of death, the Virginia opossum will not be affected by this poison. The Virginia opossum can also eat parasitic or virus-carrying vertebrates and invertebrates without being affected. Like I mentioned before, they can eat ticks, they can eat worms, and they can become a parasite carrier. However, they themselves will not develop any negative side effects or symptoms from these parasitic or virus-carrying creatures. Up next, I'm going to talk a little bit about conservation status. So, fortunately for the Virginia opossum, its conservation status is of least concern. And just as I mentioned, the Virginia opossum is a huge generalist. So, the only reason it can afford to really be a species of least concern is through its very large diet choice. So as I mentioned, they will pretty much eat anything. And when it comes to where they live or how they live, they are not really picky about this. And I did mention that their life expectancy is only 2 to 2.5 years in the wild. However, because they are reproducing so often and with such a large litter size, this short life expectancy does not affect their conservation status. All right. Oh, sorry. It appears to be frozen. Oh, we skipped a slide. All right. Now I will just speak a little bit on food availability or diet preference during different times in the Virginia opossum's life. So a notable characteristic of the Virginia opossum is the changeability and shifting nature of its diet. So as young, opossums' diets consist primarily of insects and plants. And as they grow into adults and they get older, they really develop a true omnivorous opossum diet. So they will eat carrion, insects, seasonal fruits, and vegetables if they are available, as well as seasonal grains. Additionally, it was noted in literature that fruit consumption for opossums has been positively correlated with reproductive success. So when the time comes, the Virginia opossum tends to put a lot of fruits and seasonally available fruits into their diet. And this happens usually once in January to February, and then again in late May and early June. Up next, I'm going to talk about how the Virginia opossum adapts its diet with the changing seasons, as in spring, summer, fall, and winter. I will just move myself to here. So first I'll discuss spring, summer, and fall. So in the warmer seasons, the opossum's efforts mostly go towards foraging seasonally available fruit and scavenging carrion rather than hunting insects and food items that they have to work harder for. Opossums are kind of lazy, so when it comes to looking for food, they really do try and take the easiest route. So that being said, when winter comes around, especially for the opossums that live in the northern range, where there isn't really isn't any seasonally available fruit or crops or plant matter for them to eat. Opossums will hunt insects in decomposing logs, they'll scavenge carrion, and if they can find those, and if they can, the opossums that live in more urban areas, they will also try and find trash to scavenge through as a food source. Additionally, if their habitat permits it, so if they live in the more southern parts, um, they will try and go through um, places where there might be crops or crop stalks available. So agricultural properties where there are grain stalks for them to snack on. Opossums, as I mentioned before, are opportunistic and they do not make a reserve or stockpile of food for the winter. So because they are rather lazy and they don't take the time to do this, if they cannot find food in the winter, they sometimes do go several days without eating. All right. So now I have the food analysis for one of the food items that the wild Virginia opossum would eat. So that is the wild blueberry. And as I was taking care of the opossums at Aspen Valley, blueberries were one of their favorite snacks, which is why I chose to include it. So here I have the approximate analysis. So the ash makes up 5.17%. Moisture content of the blueberry is 81.83%. Fat is very low with 0.1%. Protein, again, is on the lower end at 0.55. And the soluble carbohydrates come up to 12.35%. And when talking about metabolizable energy, we're using the equation here. And so after going through all the steps, the ME for the blueberries is 525 kcals per kilogram, but I wanted to have the ME for one blueberry. On average, a blueberry weighs 0.5 grams. So I first took the 525 kcals per kg and divided it by 1,000 to get the metabolizable energy for 1 gram. And from there, because the blueberry weighs 0.5 of a gram, I divided this number by 2 to get 0.2625 ME for one blueberry. Similarly to the blueberry, up next I have the red raspberry. So the approximate analysis, I have ash coming in at 9.51%, moisture 79.37%, fat 0.8%, protein 1.1%, and soluble carbohydrates at 9.83%. Again, for metabolizable energy, I did go through all the steps to find kcal per kilograms, but I did want to end with the metabolizable energy of one red raspberry. So here I have 453.8 divided by 1,000 to get the ME for 1 gram. I then found the weight of one singular raspberry, which is 4 grams. So I then multiplied the value for 1 gram, which is 0.4538 times 4. And so the ME for one raspberry is 1.8152. Up next, I will be discussing the digestive tract of the Virginiana opossum. So the digestive tract anatomy of the Virginia opossum is a very typical omnivore for omnivorous mammals. The opossum's GIT is characterized by a relatively short intestinal tract like that of carnivores. They do, however, have an enlarged hindgut, which enables them to digest hard fibrous materials and compounds such as plant material. And they also have a well-developed cecum here, which is very important for the digestion of plant matter, such as cellulose and hemicellulose. The stomach of the opossum is described as unilocular, meaning it is single-chambered. Up next, I'm just going to discuss a little bit about how the Virginia opossum will eat their food. So first, the opposable thumbs, also known as the hallux, allows the opossum to push food into their mouths. The Virginia opossum has sharp incisors and canine teeth, which allows them to tear into carrion and other vertebrates. This is mechanical digestion. Their broad premolars and molar teeth gives the opossum the ability to crush and grind up whatever food they are consuming. And this increases surface area for chemical digestion. Salivary enzymes, such as salivary amylases, begins the digestion of soluble carbohydrates while the food is in the mouth. In the small and large intestine, heteroendocrine cells are present, and these cells contain very specific regulatory peptides and amines that aid in controlling digestion and in chemical digestion for the Virginia opossum. And finally, any waste is excreted through the cloaca. Another fun fact, so the Virginia opossum has the most teeth of any North American land mammal, and this is 50 teeth. So that's their full count. And as I mentioned before, it consists of incisors, large canines, premolars, and molars. And here I have a photo of one of the opossums that lived at Aspen Valley. And as you can see here, he is holding onto the edge of his food container with his little opposable thumb, and he's ready to dig in for a snack. Next up, I'm going to talk about the energy requirements for the Virginia opossum. So first, I'm going to discuss energy requirements for maintenance. So here I have calculated the basal metabolic rate. So the average adult opossum weighs 3.74 kgs. And to estimate the basal metabolic rate of a marsupial mammal, we'll be using the following equation. So BMR equals 46.6 times body weight to the power of 0.737. And here I have replaced the body weight value with the average adult opossum weight. And this gives us a BMR of 123.2 kcals per day. As I was going through literature, it was mentioned several times that the Virginia opossum has one of the lowest BMRs for a land mammal. So when I got this value, at first I was a little startled of how low it was. However, once I found these notes in literature, I was a little bit more okay with my value. So I thought this was really interesting. Now, when talking about the daily energy expenditure, so to estimate the daily energy expenditure of the Virginia opossum, I averaged the two values that was found in the Robbins text. So we were given from this text the daily energy expenditure of a small insectivorous marsupial, which would be 6.3 times its BMR. And we were also given the daily energy expenditure of a large herbivorous marsupial. So because the Virginia opossum is medium-sized and it is omnivorous, I reached out to the teaching team and asked them if it would be okay if I averaged these two values, and they advised me that that was fine. So here I added together 6.3 and 2.5, which were the two values up here, and that gave me a total of 8.8, and to average them out, I divided them by 2. So I will be multiplying my BMR by 4.4. So to get the daily energy expenditure of the Virginia opossum, I multiplied its BMR by 4.4. So here I have 4.4 times 123.2, which gives us a daily energy expenditure for the Virginia opossum of 542.08 kcals per day. Up next, I'll be discussing the energy requirements for reproduction. So as we all know, lactation will require a little bit more energy than just the normal day-to-day daily energy expenditure for maintenance of the Virginia opossum. So to estimate the daily energy expenditure of a lactating mammal, we will use the following equation. So we will be multiplying its BMR by 5.5. So here I have 5.5 times 123.2, and this gives us 677.6 kcals per day. Next, I'll be speaking on the energy requirements for growth. So first things first, I needed to estimate the BMR for a Virginia opossum joey, so a juvenile. And I did this by taking an equation from the Robbins text. So here I have BMR equals 46.6 times the body weight, which is 0.737. So, and the body weight of a joey at birth is 0.6 grams. So here I have 7.456 kcals per day for the BMR of an opossum joey. Next, to estimate the DEE for a Virginia opossum joey, I'll be multiplying 7.456 kcals per day times 4.4, which is the same value I calculated in the past two slides to get that DEE for maintenance. To estimate the growth rate of the Virginia opossum, I'm using the growth rate estimation equation for marsupials, also found in the Robbins text. So here I have Y, which is the growth rate of a juvenile in grams per day, and I have W, which is the body weight of the adult in grams. So I have Y equals 0.003 with the body weight of the adult, which is 3.74 in grams to the power of 0.82. And this gave me an average growth rate of 2.39 grams per day. Following this, to calculate the energy required for daily growth of the juvenile animal, from literature, we know that the energy requirement for growth is between 1 and 3 kcals per gram. So we will be using the mean of this average. So we will be using 2 kcals per gram. So the energy required for daily growth is 2 kcals per gram times the growth rate, which is 2 kcals per gram times 2.39 grams per day. So this gives us 4.78 kcals per day. From here, we know that for the joey to maintain body weight, it requires 32.8 kcals a day. And for the joey to afford to grow, it needs an additional 4.7 kcals per day. So by adding these two values, we can obtain the daily energy expenditure for growth of a Virginia opossum joey. So here we are adding 32.8 kcals a day to 4.7 kcals a day, and the total DEE for growth of a Virginia opossum joey is 37.58 kcals per day. Up next, I'll be discussing the consumption of wild blueberries required to meet energy needs. So to meet basal metabolic rate for maintenance and for the Virginia opossum, we will be needing to meet the Virginia opossum's BMR of 123.2 kcal ME per day. So as we calculated before, one wild blueberry is 0.2625 kcal ME. So here we are using the BMR and we are dividing it by the ME of one wild blueberry. And this gives us a value of 469.3 blueberries per day. I did round up because eating 0.3 of a blueberry is a little tedious and I don't think the opossum could do so. So I have roughly 470 wild blueberries per day to sustain the Virginia opossum's BMR. Up next, to sustain the daily energy expenditure for maintenance of the Virginia opossum, which is 542.08 kcals, we will need to divide this DEE of 542.08 by the metabolizable energy in a blueberry, which is 0.2625. And this gives us a value of 2065.06. So again, I did round up. So this is roughly 2066 wild blueberries per day to sustain the Virginia opossum's DEE. All right. So, and now similarly, I have the same calculations for the consumption of red raspberries required to meet energy needs. So for basal metabolic rate, the Virginia opossum's BMR, as I mentioned before, is 123.2, and the ME for one red raspberry is 1.8152, like we calculated in previous slides. So I will be taking the Virginia opossum's BMR of 123.2 and dividing this by the ME of the red raspberry, which is 1.1852, and this gives us a value of 68.87. So again, I did round up, which is roughly 69 red raspberries per day to sustain the Virginia opossum's BMR. And similarly, with the daily energy expenditure of 542.08 for the Virginia opossum, I took this value and divided it by the ME of the red raspberry, which gave us 298.63. And after rounding up, it will take us roughly, or it will take the Virginia opossum roughly 299 red raspberries per day to sustain its DEE. And to end off this lecture on a little bit more of a fun note, the name opossum is an anglicized version of the Algonquin word opossum or opossum, which means white animal. And the O was later dropped and possum became the slang name. However, when referring to the Virginia opossum, saying opossum is the preferred. And that concludes the lecture. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed learning about one of my favorite wild animals, the Virginia opossum. Thank you.